Recording in progress.
Well, thank you everybody. It is 7:15 and welcome to the once again virtual session of the Norton Planning Board's meeting of Tuesday, April 27th. Again, I'm going to start this meeting with our ever lovely introduction discussing remote participation. So, pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the Governor's March 15th order imposing a limitation on the number of people gathering in one place, this meeting of the Town of Norton Planning Board is being conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation of members of the public and or parties of the right or requirement to attend the meeting can be found on the Town of Norton's website, that is nortonma.org, not .com. For this meeting, you can participate in the following ways. You can join online via video using the link available on the agenda, or join using the Zoom app with meeting ID 638-929-1060. There is also a dial-in number available on the agenda. You can also view the meeting on Norton Cable Access Channel 15 or the next day on the Norton Media Center's YouTube page. Again, no in-person attendance of members of the public is being permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In addition, please feel free to email questions to the board ahead of the meeting or during the meeting to Paul DiGiuseppe, the town planner, whose email address is available on the town's website. Again, additionally, you'll find meeting materials on a public-facing folder on the Norton Planning Board's web page on the website. Every effort is being made to ensure the public can adequately access these proceedings in real time. In the event we're unable to do so, we'll post on the Town of Norton's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other record of the proceedings as soon as possible thereafter. So, that out of the way, kind of calling the meeting to order, I want to make sure to start off and welcome our two newest members of the board, Alan Booley and Wayne Graff. So, welcome both of you to the planning board.
Sure.
It's going to be it is a fun ride, let me tell you. So now that we have new members on board, we are going to move to our next item of business, which with a new construction of the board comes the election of the chair, vice chair, and clerk positions on the board. So for this process, we'll look for people to be, somebody can nominate any member of the board, that person can accept or decline. And if there are multiple people who are nominated and accept for a specific position, then we'll do a vote and we'll move on down the line. So the first position that will open up for election is the chair of the planning board. So I will open the floor to nominations.
I'd like to nominate Tim Griffin for the chair. It's Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. I would be happy to accept the nomination.
This is Scott. I'll second that.
Thank you, Scott, for the second. Are there any other nominations for the position of chair? I believe you can nominate yourself, so that is an option, but I'm hearing crickets, so unless somebody pipes in and cuts off my rambling in the next little bit, I guess I'll move ahead as the only nominated person here.
You've done a great job, Tim. I would wholeheartedly support that nomination.
Okay. Well, I don't think we need to do a formal roll call vote here. So I guess thank you very much, and I won't have to change my Zoom name on the meeting. So moving on to the position of vice chair, are there any nominations for this position?
I'd like to nominate Julie Oakley for vice chair. It's Kevin.
I'll accept that, Kevin, yes.
I'll second that.
Okay. Are there any additional nominations? Steve, if you would like me to, I'd be happy to nominate you, as you've served earnestly as vice chair over the past year.
No, that's fine.
Okay. Well then, Julie, I believe you are officially appointed as the vice chair of the planning board.
Thank you. Now somebody else is going to have to do the tracking sheets now that I'm not clerk, though. So you guys might just have made a bad decision.
Okay. By the way, Julie, I'm going to be gone for about 2 months starting. I'm just kidding.
I figured that's going to happen, Tim. I mean, bring it on.
Okay. And finally, the position of clerk.
I'd like to nominate Steve Holmsley as clerk. It's Kevin.
It's Hornsby, but
Yeah. Sorry, buddy. I knew that. I almost called you Steve PB from your name on your on the Zoom.
All right.
Okay. I will second that. I think you accepted, correct, Steve? You declined? Okay. I apologize. Then I withdraw my second for something that you declined. Okay. So we do have the position of clerk available for nominations. If there aren't any additional nominations at this time, we can push this off to our next agenda. I realize it's literally the first item of business for both Wayne and Alan, which is a little bit strange given that you've never met any of us in person. So
I'll nominate Scott for clerk if you would accept.
I would accept that nomination. I'll second that then.
Okay. Are there any additional nominations for the position of clerk? Hearing none, that makes it easy. Scott, congratulations. You are now the clerk for the Norton Planning Board. Julie, I'm not sure if you have any additional actions in flight that you need to brief Scott on, or in terms of anything further. I believe the tracking sheet was his idea in the first place, so that makes it very easy.
No, I mean, it's in COVID times, it's been relatively easy. You just sign the documents and then you can drop them in the box for fall. So it's been very, very easy, and all the tracking sheets are loaded on Dropbox. And I think the only active tracking sheet we have is 0 Eddy Street, right, Paul? So
Right.
I think we're at a good transition point, and I'd be happy to help Scott in any way he needs as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Julie.
Okay. Well, that takes care of the election of the chair, vice chair, and clerk. I don't believe we have anything additional for planning board business and policies. We do have a few bills in the Dropbox. Wayne and Alan, I'm not sure if you had a chance to review any of the files sent out to the board, as well as the board members themselves. There are, looks like 3 invoices in there. Paul, did you want to just give a quick summary of those 3? I think I've seen them already, but just as for the record.
Sure, and so for Alan and Wayne, the ZB, I mean the planning board. See, Alan, you threw me off. The planning board has the ability to. They authorize Tim to sign bills on behalf of the board. So when we have them, he'll swing by and get them. So so these 3 bills that are in here. Let me just go back here. One is an invoice from Amory Engineering. They're a peer reviewer. They're an engineering firm, and they did a peer review for us. This was for 312 Taunton Ave. This was a site plan that was approved about a month ago. And then we had some costs, copying costs associated with the the rezonings over on White Drive, and then Vistaprint. I believe I had run out of business cards, and so that was for the printing of some new business cards.
Go, Paul, $20 for business cards. It's a rough one to start with.
And that doesn't include tax, so let's be.
That doesn't include tax.
Does not include tax, so.
Yeah, no, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to go. Never mind. But
No. But yeah, no, I think I've already. I think I've signed 2 of these. I don't believe I've signed the copying one, but I will get that on my next time through. But again, these are for the board to review and ask questions about if they have any. But since we are not in normal times, we're doing a not normal process. So the next item we have is approval of minutes from our previous meeting, which was April the 6th. Those are in the Dropbox folder. Obviously, Wayne and Alan, you were not present for this meeting, so you don't need to worry about it. But I will see if Steve, Julie, Kevin, or Scott have any notes or comments they would like for these minutes.
Oh, are these the final ones? I thought the copy I saw had like a lot of still like highlighted areas.
I was just going to say, I was saying that, but I was muted.
Oh, sorry, Steve.
Yeah,
I'm going to have to defer to Nicole on this. She handles the minutes.
yeah. There is at least one. There are a couple of highlights here. One for making sure that we have the correct name of an abutter, and then the final section is highlighted, which I believe is just to confirm the roll call votes. But I think, given that, Nicole, unless you know that we have that information ready to go, we can postpone the approval of these till our next meeting.
I don't remember putting these in here, so I don't know. I'm trying to pull it up. My Word is paused, but I don't know if these were completed. I usually highlight things that need to be kind of like fact checked and go back to look at. So if you guys don't mind, I can fix these up for you.
That is fine. We will table the approval of the April 6th meeting minutes until our next meeting. So, the next item, which I'm sure Paul has been waiting with bated breath on, is the scheduling of future meeting dates. So Paul, just as a reminder, we have which meetings currently scheduled. I believe we just have this one, and then the
May 11th.
And then May 11th?
Right.
And that's all that we have, correct?
Correct. So it'd be great if we could get a few more months just to stay ahead of schedule. I know that we are going to have a few more applications coming in relatively soon. So we can't schedule anything if we don't have dates. So
yeah. So May 11th is already scheduled in there. 2 weeks from that would be May the 25th. I believe Memorial Day is the 31st, so it does not conflict with Memorial Day. Does anybody have specific conflicts on Tuesday, May the 25th? I guess not. Okay. Well, there's one. In June, if we continue on every other week, those dates would be the 8th and the 22nd of June. The 22nd is the Tuesday after Father's Day, but that's not generally a conflict that far out. But if unless I have any objections, I'd pencil in the 8th and the 22nd of June. Hearing none. Okay. I'm taking silence as agreement, so
Sounds good.
keep going there. In July, 2 weeks would be this July the 6th. I know a lot of businesses are closed on Monday the 5th, observing July 4th on that day. Would people prefer to go with the 13th and the 27th? Or
I'm away that first week, I think.
the first week? So the 6th is probably bad, perhaps.
I think the 13th and 27th is best.
Okay.
My
I
opinion.
agree.
Does anybody have anything that would be a conflict that far out? I was we're going 3 months in advance, so it's okay. So the 13th and the 27th. And while we're looking at it, I don't know if we feel like August is a little bit too far away, but if we're in the summer, every 2 weeks would be the 10th and the 24th of August.
Looks good.
And I think Labor Day is a good enough day to stop before we go any further for now, Paul. Does that seem to...
Perfect.
Okay.
Also, with the cases going down, and maybe Governor Baker could lift the meeting orders, or hopefully we can get back to in-person meetings soon. Right, Paul and the gang?
That will be a goal, yes, Peter. But ultimately, we are waiting on the governor and then the town manager on that, and then we have to figure out a space to meet in, since the Board of Selectmen meeting room is still not available due to fire code stuff.
Yep. So probably the
So we will be figuring that out as it comes. But I will leave that in the hands of capable town staff as they continue to deal with this
That's
day to
right.
day.
That's why maybe the North Media Center could be a spot, right?
Yep, we'll have to see. But we're not the only board, so. But now we've got our meetings scheduled through the summer, Paul. So we gotta get first. I'm kidding.
Well, it helps. I mean, in fact, the town manager did ask what the interest is of starting in-person meetings again. So I need to flush that out a little bit more, and we can, I guess, either deal with it at the next meeting or maybe through email.
Yeah, I think that might be something that once you have it fleshed out, send out via email. We can discuss it at the next meeting.
Yeah.
And just have an open forum. Obviously, everybody's dealing with this situation in many different ways, with many different complications and conflicts. So there we go. So that takes care of future meeting dates. The next item on our agenda is a continued public hearing for special permit 494 0 Rear Eddy Street. Paul, have you heard anything from this applicant, or are they here?
Motion to continue?
They gave me, I emailed them last week. I've heard nothing.
Okay.
One thing I did hear from the Conservation Commission is that they are continued till May 10th, I believe, with conservation,
Okay.
but they're not here. Well, I don't believe they're here.
I believe that, I think we've discussed them as if they're not in the room for long enough for them to have found the unmute button if they were here.
Yeah, if I may interject real quick, this is Attorney Tom Gay from Gay & Gay. We represent a butter. In previous meetings, the petitioners at least kind of given you notice, so they can update their agenda, or we can reach out to your town clerk or assistant to find out if it's going to be continued or not. I think
I understand,
somewhat
yeah.
disrespectful for them not to be here and not to make any communications to you. that they don't intend to present or request a continuance at all.
So my motion to continue would be the 18th.
The 18th.
Yeah, if they're not meeting with.
Do you mean May 11th? We have May 11th and May 25th. I was going to suggest.
The 25th.
I was going to suggest that we continue this to June 8th. Because I'm sick of unless I'm sick of seeing this on our agenda every meeting and continuing at every meeting.
Right, and I last week I sent them as part of the email reminding them you have a couple options.
Yeah.
Go forward and realize that our 2 new members cannot vote, so you would need all 5, or withdraw and resubmit it. So,
Well, at what point has it been too long for them to keep continuing this? Because this is going on an absurd amount of time.
well, if they've continued it, then then the 180 days or so gets not to be an issue. But this is, we've had this almost a year, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So I'll amend my motion to June 8th with Tim.
I would look to the 25th or the 8th, or at least skip a meeting. Yeah. So I'll leave that to your preference, Steve.
Yeah, I'll say June 8th, the June meeting. What I'd like to know what our options are to, if they're not going to show up at that meeting either, to get it off our agenda.
They would have to, from my understanding, they would have to withdraw the application in any way. Our only action would be to vote one way or the other, to close the public hearing and move one way or the other. And if they're not here to be part of that conversation, then we have to take action independently. Yeah. So Steve, your motion was to continue to June 8th.
Yes.
I'll second.
Thank you, Julie, for the second.
Mr. Chair, just one question, maybe for Paul. Is the applicant are they requesting a continuation from meeting to meeting? Has there been any dialogue or contact with them?
Yeah, typically they do send an email, and I'll put that in Dropbox, but they did not this time.
Was there a conservation meeting being continued as well? Is that what kept happening?
It was. I believe they met last night. They usually meet the Monday before us, but I don't know that they were on it. But I was told by the administrative assistant that they're on for May 10th.
Right, because I know for a fact, that's a few times we've continued based on the fact that we were waiting for them to seek conservation, so.
And they've been continued at conservation as well.
Yeah. So.
But again, they have a big decision to make.
Yeah.
Respectfully, with them not requting a continuance, the
Mr.
board.
Gay, this is not.
Sorry,
we're
I
not
apologize.
accepting- No, thank you. I appreciate that you are here at a meeting where you obviously didn't need to be here, and that is a source of frustration both for you and an ongoing source of frustration for your client. But yeah, so we have a motion on the floor and a second. Is there any further discussion from members of the board?
Just to kind of put it out there, I might move to close the public hearing on June 8th if they're not going to be here.
Understood, Steve.
Understood.
Any further discussion from members of the board? Otherwise, I will move to the roll call vote here, which is done in order by however people are arranged in my Zooms to keep myself sane. So I will start with Wayne. This is you're up first.
Yes.
Actually, Paul, are they allowed even to vote on the continuation of the public hearing?
I would say for the safety, I would say probably not.
Okay. Well,
And I'll abstain.
okay. And Alan, I'm going to say you're abstaining as well.
Yes, sir.
So I will start with Steve.
Yes.
Julie.
Yes.
Kevin.
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. So it's 5-0 and 2 abstentions to continue Zero Ready Street to June 8th. Paul, even though they're not on the agenda, if there is further communication from this applicant, let us know, and we can cover it in terms of planning board business and policies at whatever meeting makes sense.
Okay. Understood.
Okay. So the other items on our agenda, we have an initial overview presentation by Solar Norton Retail regarding their upcoming application for a proposed dispensary at 242 Mansfield Avenue. Paul, do you know if I saw a couple people just turn their cameras on, so I'm assuming that they are from Solar Norton Retail?
They are.
So, thank you for joining us virtually this evening. Understanding there are at least 1 or 2 members of the public dialed into the meeting here. I'll let you go through your presentation. If there are questions from members of the public and you would like to answer them, you certainly can, but you're under no obligation to do so. But hearing that, I'll let you kind of go right ahead. You should have the ability to share your screen should you so choose.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, my name is Stuart Clark. I'm with Green Seal Environmental. I appreciate you guys having us in. Paul thought it would be a good idea if we came and spoke with the board informally, seeing how there were going to be 2 new members, Alan and Wayne, just to get everybody up to speed on what we're proposing. I do have a screen to share here. We are seeking a special permit with site plan review to run a marijuana dispensary at 242 Mansfield Ave, which was Route 140. It was the old mini golf ice cream place, and it's sandwiched between Cumberland Farms and New England Ice Cream. Currently there is, let me just share the screen so we can talk about this intelligently. I think that's the one. Can you guys see that one?
It is loading up, and yes, we see it. Thank you.
All right, this is the existing conditions on the site. There's a large paved area, approximately 13,000 square feet of pavement. If I could get my mouse down there, I would use my pointer, but I am having challenge. All right, here we go. This area here is a paved area. They used to have the golf course, if you will, over in this area. This is all the structures have been removed, and they installed a recycled asphalt millings there, and they utilize this area and as well as the rest of the lot for event parking for the Xfinity Center. There is one small building on the site that houses a couple bathrooms, has electrical service. The building has municipal town and municipal water service, and there's a concrete pad out here which I am unsure of what its purpose was at one time, but it had one, if that makes sense. If you will, I'm going to plop over to the new one. So this is what we are proposing. Basically, almost in the same footprint, we want to put a new building. We're going to raise what's there, regrade the lot so we can get the stormwater to work correctly. We aren't going to touch any of the vegetative buffer around the property. We're going to actually augment it with plantings in some islands here and along Route 140 in accordance with your bylaw. It does get a little steep over here. In this area, we're proposing to put, like a beach grass, seagrass, the tall grasses you see in the ornamental ones, just to give some screening. There will be new lighting system. The building again will be serviced by town water and sewer. It will not be sprinklered. It will have adequate accessibility from these spots here. I think we're overparked on this because the whole industry is relatively new. I think everyone can agree. we're thinking that the peak hour or the peak flows may surpass the standard retail parking requirements of zoning. So we have elected to overpark this with the thought that employees will mostly park in the back. The customers will use the front and the side and overflow into the back if they have to. The building meets all the zoning setbacks. And another thing that we've talked with Paul about, we had a pre-construction meeting with the department heads, and the applicant has agreed that there will be no event parking in the future when he is in control of this property. I think that does it for my presentation. I have Andre with me, and he can answer any operational questions you guys may have. I do have a screen dumpster in the back. There is a interior room where the vans do their loading and unloading in a closed space, so it won't be in the public, and it's also on the back of the building. But I think that's basically what we're trying to do here. And, you know, I will leave any, you know, I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have. I could get back to my other screen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clark. Andre, I apologize. I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name because it's also partially cut off on my screen, so I can't see the whole thing. But if you'd like to give any additional kind of overview comments about operational of the business, and go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to speak a little bit to some of the operational considerations. First and foremost, I just wanted to say hello to everybody on the planning board. It's nice to meet you all. We've been working primarily with Paul and also Renee, but it's great to see a lot of new faces, and also welcome the 2 new members. I think most of the operational considerations are covered in the comprehensive, I think it was 150 some odd page packet that we had to submit as part of this special permit. But really, you know, at the end of the day, it's not too much different than your boutique retail or maybe your Starbucks in town in terms of traffic volume or operations as they might appear from the exterior. So, you know, I'm happy to answer any question that folks may have. The one actually, there's two pieces of good news that I'm happy to share. I did have a meeting with the mobile home community siting behind our parcel. Sorry, my lighting. I had natural light here when we started, and it looks like the sun has gone down. So let me see if that's better. So I'm very happy to report that I sat with the manager there and his admin for almost 45 minutes, and they were not only open to the idea, but actually very supportive. So that was a welcome piece of news for us and a relief. So really happy about that. And I did have just a quick update on the odor control issue. Paul, I know that this is something we had discussed in the past, and you were helpful to share some resources that we might be able to reach out to. And what we've done to date is actually shared our odor control plan with one of the engineering firms that was on your list, Paul. And I have a really nice letter from them, essentially, which should be included in the packet, but it highlights that our odor control plan, as well as our use, will not be generating any sort of an odor nuisance. So that was just one piece of news that I wanted to share with the group. But other than that, I'm happy to keep it fairly informal. I'm sure folks might have some questions, so I'm happy to field them as you have them and answer any questions you may have.
Sure. Yeah, I think from our perspective, Stu answered one of mine right off the bat in terms of event parking. But in terms of just kind of general operationally of the business, Andre, is this, I is this generally the type of, you mentioned kind of a traffic in terms of a Starbucks and things like that. Is this set up as an appointment business? Is it anybody walks in? How does that kind of structure work in terms of members of the public going into the facility?
Sure. So the general customer workflow is a traditional retail workflow where, members of the public that are of age can come into the building. But once they're into the building, there is a whole host of security protocols that we have to follow to ensure that we are following the state's regulations. And, basically that starts with verifying the customer's identity, verifying their age. And at that point, they're essentially only able to access the main sales floor of the building. Behind the sales floor, we have level 2 access, which is where the team members and management will have access to. And then the third and most secure level of access is our secure vault, where we keep the product and we keep cash. So those are kind of the main considerations around traffic flow and access control. So I hope that answers your question.
Sure.
And Chair, if I can just add that Chief Clark has been reviewing this. Remember that this whole process started many months ago when they had to get their host community agreements. So Renee was actively involved with the Select Board and the Economic Development Commission, but the Chief was involved back then looking at the security plans. He and other staff members have the new proposal as well, and will weigh in on it.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. We'll obviously look forward to the thoughts of those town department heads. Do any other members of the board have questions for either members of the applicant team that are here about the site and or just kind of the operations of the proposed facility?
I do have one question, maybe it's more for Paul. I saw there was a traffic study already done in the Dropbox. Is there any way, or is it considered that there is possibly a 40B that would be right across the street? Is there any way for both those traffic studies to get integrated together or factored together? Or
They will need to be. I haven't had a chance to review the documents yet. We will also be getting a peer review. So I do get Andre to get that, but we'll have certainly a traffic peer review along with engineering peer review, site plan peer review. So they will need to factor both 40Bs, the one at 195 and 253. I mean they should be considering 253 because that's more than likely approved next month. So.
I know in other traffic studies we have factored in the potential increase of other projects that might have on traffic. So that's
right. That's
normally
a typical. Oh, I'm sorry, Chair.
No, go ahead.
That's a typical standard to factor in proposed projects, or certainly, 195 Mansfield's been approved, and I think it's our perspective that we need to ensure that 253 Mansfield is considered because again, it's heading toward approval.
Paul, how many units are each of those?
100 at 195 Mansfield and 60 at 253.
those 240Bs were my crash course on the planning board.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can I ask a question? Is there any way we could send this out to our peer review before our next meeting? Just so that we can get a jump on it? Is that something that the board can vote on tonight, even though it's not a public hearing?
I'm not sure how the procedure would be for that.
Okay.
We generally don't get too involved in the selection of peer reviewers and things like that. I think, Paul, that's something that you've generally managed in terms of getting bids for that and the process behind that.
Right, so typically the goal is to have the first peer review done before the first public meeting. So tomorrow I wanted to talk to you both to see about that. But as I mentioned, when we've met earlier, I wanted to make sure in this case, if you wanted any additional peer reviews done, then, in addition to the engineering and traffic, were there things like, well, Andre's addressed odor. We'll need to take a look at that. But as he's pointed out to me, retail stores, the product comes in already packaged. It's not a cultivation site where it's, fresh and, that's where the odor is really significant. But, and then the other issue I want to just bring up, because this has been an issue with their neighbor at New England Ice Cream, is a noise issue from the rooftop units at New England Ice Cream and their trucks, the impacts to the people at the mobile home park. I know that's a different issue here, but it is something that we will want to make sure doesn't become an issue because of its proximity to the mobile home park. I mean, we've had this conversation with Andre and Stu. I'll probably have the building commissioner weigh in on that. I mean, if we don't need to do a peer review, that's fine if we feel like we can address it in other ways. But anyway, I just wanted to make sure as part of this conversation, if you had additional direction for us on peer review, or any other specific issue you had that you might be wanting to focus on.
Well, through the chairman, in other towns, it's gone the other way, where you go to your first meeting and then the planning board elects to send it to peer review, and you lose like a 2-week window there. So I'm happy to hear that you send it out, prior to the first meeting. As for noise concerns, I would leave that with Andre. Obviously, what we have there is nowhere near a New England Ice Cream, with trucks idling and refrigeration equipment on the roof. We will have an HVAC system there, but it won't be as robust as New England Ice Cream, and it'll be similar to what's there at the Cumberland Farms now.
Yeah, I actually had a great conversation with the manager of the mobile home park behind, and I guess it's specifically the refrigeration, those massive refrigeration units during the evening,
right.
After people are trying to sleep, that they have issues with. Paul, definitely appreciate you getting this on our radar. It's already something that we've discussed with Stu as well as our construction team. So it's on our radar, and we're absolutely planning on getting ahead of it, whether, that's putting some sort of shielding, so that the noise isn't able to travel back there, or strategically placing the units in such a way where the noise just doesn't reach the back of our site there.
Understood. Yeah, obviously you don't have to worry about ice cream melting, so that is a factor that is a key factor for your neighbor there. Are there any additional questions from members of the board for Stu or Andre here while we have them on the meeting prior to their first official public hearing? Okay. I'm not sure if Stu or Andre, if you would like to see if there are any members of the public who have any questions that they'd like to ask, or if you'd like to save that for the public hearing itself.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Happy to. If there are any members of the public that are on today's meeting that would like to ask a question, please feel free.
Okay. I do see Mr. Keys has his virtual hand raised in the Zoom meeting. So thank you for doing that. So I see you right away. And if you'd like to go ahead and ask a question for Stu or Andre here. Again, this isn't a public hearing. It's just an informational presentation from them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. So my name is Chris Keys. I'm a Norton resident. I live at 263 Godfrey Drive, which is the Great Brook development of 116 units with people 55 and over. also known as Jurassic Park. I wanted to, first of all, applaud the members of the board for your volunteer service. Appreciate all that you've done. You know, I've watched from the sidelines, being recently retired. This is the first opportunity I've really had to be able to go ahead and engage in what's happening in the town. Just want to applaud the planning board for all the fine work that they've done. I'd also like to say that you have a fantastic town planner. Paul is terrific. I've had the opportunity to work with Paul recently and can correspond. He's done a wonderful job in general, but specifically the work he's done and the due diligence he's done relative to the marijuana bylaws for the town has been excellent. So I feel like the town has a great foundation from which to be able to make the decisions relative to this particular project. I'd also like to say that, you know, the Route 140 corridor, I ride my bicycle just about every day. One direction of Route 140 north, 140 south, and take my life into my hands every single day. It's only about a mile until I get off of 140, but I say a prayer before I leave the house. But the reality is that it's only if we, as a town, as a community, that we achieve the kind of critical mass of development that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts will take the Route 140 project seriously, okay? So as a very local resident to this particular project, New England Ice Cream, 40B projects at 195 and the other address on Mansfield Ave, the reality is the town needs the revenue, the town needs the development, and it's important that we really saturate that particular area. And at some point, I think the Commonwealth and the Mass DOT will take that project seriously and put it into effect. You know, hopefully sooner rather than later. If this infrastructure plan goes through, it would be fantastic. But I just want to say, you know, as a member of the community who uses that road, you have to take the good with the bad. So I applaud the work that everybody's doing, and you know, obviously the laws in Massachusetts indicate that marijuana is part of the future, and I think that the town has really prepared itself well to be able to go ahead and make decisions relative to introducing marijuana into the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keys, for your comments. Okay, and Mr. Wiggins, I see you have your hand raised as well. So if you want to make a comment, please go ahead, Peter.
Yes, I agree with Chris, and I also live on 140, not too far from where you live, Chris, and I use that road lots of times, and the traffic there can get busy at times, and it is time that the state will put in an effort to what to do with a 140 corridor. Thank you very much.
Okay. I don't see any additional members of the public here to ask any further questions. So I think that kind of wraps it up for kind of the presentation today. Thank you again, Stu and Andre, for your time. Unless you have any kind of closing comments, we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. I just wanted to say in closing that we're really excited to work with the planning board and the rest of the departments in town. We really are an open book. We want to have a long-lasting partnership, so really encourage an open dialogue around concerns, ideas. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You know, we'll do everything we can to be the best corporate citizen in town, and really look forward to the partnership.
Okay, thank you both.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, the next item on the agenda, Renee, I'm not sure if you're here to speak to this specifically, but
I'm here.
Just a refresher on the marijuana bylaw here, which again is going before town. This is the one that was approved in October, correct?
Yes.
And then we have an additional update going toward town meeting in a few weeks.
We do, yeah.
Okay.
So just a little bit of background on a couple things. things, and I do want to show you guys, just for awareness, kind of the process that the marijuana establishments go through, specifically the retail establishments that we defined. But just some background on the bylaw. We previously had only a bylaw for registered medical dispensaries. That bylaw didn't address anything on marijuana establishments outside of that specific type. So the Economic Development Commission spent a little over a year to essentially rewrite the bylaw. It was a full delete and replace to get the existing bylaw in place. And I think, I don't know if you had forwarded them what I sent to you, and I know it was late last night, I apologize, but the bylaw, the Attorney General has asked for an extension in the review and approval of this particular article, so we won't have their final write-off until mid-May on this. So you'll see what I did is I sent to Paul just the meeting minutes, because that's probably the most concise area, because it's not posted out online yet, the changes, because we haven't received the final approval. And if I may share, what I'd like to show you just briefly, and you guys may remember this from, I know we presented to you guys on 2 or 3 different occasions, and certainly from the perspective of the subcommittee that assists us as well. Julie was on there, and Warren. We spent a lot of time with them going through the bylaw, making sure that, you know, we addressed concerns that they had identified, as well as some of the concerns that came up during our initial session with you guys. So just to kind of provide a bit of oversight for the new members on the process overall. So what we did, because we had a lot of interest in the retail establishments with the town of Norton, we are limited to 2 licenses within the town. That's based on 20% of all our alcohol beverage licenses. The specific terminology is in the bylaw, so forgive my paraphrasing here. So we put together a marijuana retailer subcommittee, and we reviewed 5 or 6 different applicants. Most of the information that is listed within the bylaw that has to be submitted to the planning board, as well as what has to be submitted to the Cannabis Control Commission, was also submitted as part of this process. So it helped us to shape and understand, you know, what we were looking at, and really evaluate the applicants effectively. So once that process was done, the EDC recommended applicants to the select board, and the select board chose 2 from that perspective. And then we entered into host community agreements with those applicants. That allowed them to start their application process with the state of Massachusetts. And where Andre and team are right now, they have their provisional license, so now they'll be coming before you for the site plan approval and special permitting process. So there's been quite a bit of work up to this point. To Andre's point, he was actually, you know, we were going through this process from an EDC perspective. It really was a learning experience, and Andre was one of about 7 or 8 different companies that we spoke to, really just to understand, you know, what are we looking at? What are considerations we have to take into account based on experiences in other communities, and really thinking about what was good for the town of Norton. So I just wanted to show you this because while it looks like they're halfway through the process, right, you guys have the biggest part of that. What they've already done, I don't know if they mentioned this earlier because I joined a couple minutes into the presentation, but they were required to do a community outreach meeting based on their location. That was done. It was actually, it was a really good session that they put on, and had some questions from attendees as well. Nothing, you know, that came from the session was concerning from that perspective. So anyway, you know, through the process that you guys will do, we know that will take some time, and then they'll seek that final license through the Cannabis Control Commission before actually opening up a dispensary within town. Any questions on just kind of the overall process, how we shaped it for Norton?
Yeah, and that's largely governed by the state's Cannabis Control Commission regulations, right, Renee? Especially at least the community outreach meetings and all that stuff is mandated by the state.
Yeah, the community outreach meeting, yes. Everything before the host community agreement is something that we work with town council to put in place for Norton. Okay, so what I did is I went through a portion of the bylaw just so I didn't skip over anything that may be critical. I won't spend a lot of time on the definitions. If you guys remember what was voted a couple weeks ago, we do have some updates to definitions based on the Cannabis Control Commission updates and some new regulations in place surrounding delivery operators and couriers. So that's kind of that is outside of scope of this. As Solo Retail Norton is specifically a retail establishment. Okay, I'm going to try to share here as well. And please stop me if you guys have any questions. And I'm going to preface this with, it's been a long time since I've specifically looked at this bylaw. We spent months and months looking at it, and it was refreshing once it was passed the town meeting, and we weren't staring at it every day. So I might be a little rusty as I'm reviewing this.
Certainly understandable.
Yeah, I give you guys credit because you have quite a bit of information to go through. I mean, this is just a small portion, right? And a lot of what we did in our research was to look at other bylaws. We had information given to us from KP Law. We took information from other towns. We reviewed the Cannabis Control Commission, their regulations as well, and took things that we specifically wanted to address for Norton. You guys have to get into the nitty gritty and really drill down way beyond where we ever went. So I have the utmost respect for you and wish you the best of luck while you're doing this, because it is a lot of work and certainly appreciate it. Okay, so when we rewrote the bylaw, a couple other things that we did was we established the marijuana overlay district, and in that, for those who don't know, we initially only allowed marijuana establishments in industrial zones. As part of our work here, we expanded that into village commercial and commercial, but we also put the stipulation on it that it had to reside not only in those zones, but also in the marijuana overlay district. So it had to be two. So even though we do have some industrial areas within town, they don't necessarily have the marijuana overlay district applied to it, so we wouldn't be able to have a marijuana establishment there. So that was a change that we did. We didn't make any changes to social consumption at all. We just updated really just the format of that. And I mentioned too, again, the bylaw is a very small portion. The Cannabis Control Commission regulations through 95 CMR 500, but it's pretty detailed. I think it's actually very well done. I think the controls are adequate that they've defined. It's certainly a lot of work for applicants. So I think very quickly you realize, those who are serious about partnering with the town and having a marijuana establishment in the town, because there's a lot that they have to do through the CCC. Paul, feel free to jump in on anything if there's an area that you feel is critical for the planning board to review. As I mentioned, I won't go over the definition specifically, but what we tried to do is anything that we referred to within the bylaw that you may not be familiar with, whether it came from Mass General Law or it came from the Cannabis Control Commission, we wanted to put it in here. So for anybody who was reading this, they didn't have to go back and forth into multiple documents to understand really, what are we talking about when we say cannabis or marijuana or a treatment center, whatever it might be. As you know, and it was noted up above in the use areas, the marijuana establishments are permitted by special permit in the overlay district, subject to limitations within the bylaw. I noted here just the MGL chapters that they reference and the CCC regulations that they reference as well. Throughout the bylaw, you'll see that. It's in definitions, it's in some of the other areas too. And that was something I didn't send, so if it would be helpful, Paul, I don't know if that's already provided to the planning board, but the Cannabis Control Commission, 935 CMR 500, I don't know if you've given that to them.
I know it has been shared with the board previously, but it's probably not a bad idea just to make sure that at minimum just a link to whatever their most updated set of updated and complete set of guidelines is. And if there are any check out this section notes, those would obviously be appreciated. I know I've read them previously, I think when we first approved the overlay district just for industrial, which is going back a few years. But
Sure, I can do that. I'll send those to Paul and then just ask him to forward it on. I'll do that.
I remember
the
reading them
chapter
and going and
chapters.
agreeing with you about all of the controls and all of the quote unquote hoops that are involved in all of this. That there's a lot.
Yeah, there is. And it was, we were trying to do it where we weren't duplicating a lot of the information, but at the same time making sure that we document things we wanted to. Like we were specific on the hours of operations, things like that, things that we felt were more critical to our community. We wanted to make sure that it was in the bylaw, but there are references to it through the other regulations too. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll through all of the definitions, and as I mentioned, if anybody has any questions, please let me know. Under the additional requirements and conditions, this is probably where we spent most of our time between the use physical requirements and then I think it's location requirements. As discussed earlier, from the use perspective, like marijuana establishments or the medical treatment centers can only be involved in uses permitted by their definition. It may not include other businesses or services. So we don't anticipate, and we have some controls in here where a marijuana establishment doesn't become 3 or 4 different, or like a retailer wouldn't become, another type of establishment as well. We did set the hours of operation within the bylaw. And while we all set the hours of operation as a special permitting authority, but we trimmed it down based on research to list that no retail sale, no marijuana will occur between the hours of 11 p.m. and 8 a.m. So if I remember correctly on this, we looked at not only what some other communities were doing, but also what we had established for our alcohol stores too. This section right here, I marked it in blue only because this is a change that's coming up for this town meeting. This was our oversight where we needed to change just what was required for them to get the final license from the CCC. So that's why I have it in blue. Under the physical requirements, I think a couple things that are unique to this specifically. Because it's marijuana, it does note that it has to be at a fixed location within a fully enclosed building and can't be visible from the exterior of the business. I don't know if they talked about that earlier, but one of the things that you'll consider, and if anybody has visited any of these establishments, you go to them, you can't see what's inside, right? So that's part of what's included within the bylaw, so that it's outlined, I think, not only in the CCC regulations, but also here. Also, the ventilation, I heard some conversation of that earlier. The retail establishments, through our research, are by far less likely to have any sort of an odor issue, but it does list for all marijuana establishments just the basic ventilation, so that certain things don't happen, like the odor from the marijuana or its processing. Also noted in here, just specific signage that needed to be there, just stating that the facility is limited in individuals 21 and over. And then the note, again, back to 935 CMR 500, 501 and 502, that signage had to comply with those regulations as well. This is just another mention of, the products, plants not being visible from the outside of the building. And then if this, you guys considering surrounding landscape to determine if an artificial screen would be out of character with the neighborhood. I think that was something, I remember talking about this specifically. I think that we actually took this from an existing bylaw or some conversation that we had at the time. I think it was actually around some of the solar farm discussions. But we wanted to make sure that was in there so that, things didn't look like they were standing out around the marijuana establishments. So the location information, I don't think it's anything out of the ordinary or specifically that we need to highlight here. We put some controls in respect to marijuana establishments being outside of 500 feet from each other. We also did, we listed in here, and it's in compliance with the CCC right now, that has to be 500 feet away from pre-existing public or private schools, specifically education in kindergarten or any grades 1 through 12. So I think I mentioned earlier that we have some industrial zoned areas within town, but they're not included in the marijuana overlay because they're actually close to JCS is the one that I'm thinking of offhand. So that is sitting within this bylaw.
Yeah, and Renee, if I could just add, those are some of the considerations that the select board considered when they approved both host community agreements or the locational requirements. So it was vetted, and the site for Solar Norton and the other one, were vetted and met the provisions for location.
Mm-hmm. And to add to that, during the review process of the marijuana retail subcommittee, we actually had 2 applicants close to Solar Retail Norton and across the street where I believe the other 40B is planned. We had an applicant in that location. So one of the things that we had to do is determine which of those 2 would be recommended to the select board because of the 500-foot requirement. Under the reporting requirements, I don't know, like from a comparison perspective, where this is similar to other bylaws, but there are requirements in here based on, prior to commencement of the operations, that certain things have to be provided. So police department, fire department, building commissioner, and then of course the planning board, like names and phone numbers, email addresses. There are some stipulations later on about requirements that when we reach out to them or a town official reaches out, that they have to respond within, I believe, 24 hours. But this is for issues on site, so that we as a town, if something should happen, especially after hours, we have the ability to reach out directly to contact the operators or managers of the facility. Excuse me. And then there are also requirements based on, again, notification to different public bodies or departments within the town that if there's a change in ownership or management of an establishment, there's a requirement for notice to us. And then if a violation of any law or criminal activity is attempted or occurs at the site, that they have a 12-hour requirement following the violation to notify us. Additionally, there are requirements for an annual written report. It does, it lists to appear before the special permit granting authority if requested no later than January 31st of each calendar year. So that would be something, obviously, depending upon when the organization actually commenced operations, whether or not it'd be something you'd request immediately or at a later time. But just highlighting that the option is there for that. So it's certainly something that we can do. And there are some other requirements outside of this, but from a financial perspective, that are required of the applicants as well, back to the town manager and the select board, based on some of the different items within the host community agreement. And I think I mentioned this, that the owner or manager is required to respond within 24 hours if contacted by a town official. There's some language here. This was initially, I remember this being a pretty big section that we worked with town council on to determine what was appropriate for us and what specifically we wanted within the bylaw. So it just does talk about the issuance, transfer, and discontinuation of use based on the specific type of marijuana establishment, a specific parcel, and it being non-transferable to another type of marijuana establishment or MTC. And so this was one that we spent some time with, because what we wanted to make sure of is, through the site plan approval and special permit process, if you had approved a retailer to be in a certain location, we didn't want that license to be transferred per se to a cultivator, right? And potentially a cultivation facility wouldn't be best located where a retailer was. So that would require, new submissions to the planning board, to the select board as well for an HCA. So that's one of the items here. I know we had some discussion with the planning board initially. I think that there was, I want to say a 5-year, there was some crazy 5-year limitation on here that we removed based on feedback from a couple of the planning board members. It does list that the permits and site plan approvals issued to a specific owner may be transferred to another marijuana establishment operating the same site parcel as amended to the special permit. And then there's a term limited to the duration of the applicant's ownership control. And then it just talks about some of the stipulations here about it'll lapse or expire if these following items are met. I think that was the biggest piece of it. I know I highlighted this section here about notifying the zoning enforcement officer and special permanent granting authority, within the 2 days, I was going to say 24 hours, but 48 hours of a lapse or cessation or discontinuance or expiration or revocation. One of the things I didn't highlight here because it doesn't apply for this particular applicant, but you should just be aware of, is in respect to a marijuana cultivator or product manufacturing establishment, that there are some criteria here about removing the material, plants, and other paraphernalia. So if somebody left the site, we wouldn't be stuck trying to clean it up. So it does talk about that prior to the issuance of a building permit. And I would imagine, if we have an applicant come in front of you, similar to this, Paul and I have been in contact throughout the discussions here. We'd want to make sure to highlight those areas that we felt relevant based on the applicant in front of you. The special permit procedure. So this just highlights specifically the procedure for marijuana establishments for special permitting. It talks about the application, also talks about the additional information to provide. And I think I mentioned this early on. This list is very similar to the list that was submitted to the marijuana retailer subcommittee, so that we could review and make sure that the documentation was in order. A lot of this is kind of a copy from the CCC. So, in our review, I think it kind of helped prep that next step for our not only our town, but for the applicant too. I won't go through each of these, but I imagine Paul mentioned something about, or somebody mentioned a Dropbox, so I imagine these things have already been placed in the Dropbox.
They have been.
Okay.
So they've covered all of this, and it was pretty much everything that the select board and the EDC marijuana selection committee saw a few months ago, with the big exception being the site plan. We didn't have that.
Right. Yeah, we had just a proof of concept, I guess, right at the time. So that was nice to see. The other thing, we talked about, just so you guys are aware, we talked about at length traffic. So, Paul had advised as part of the normal process, right, there's always a traffic study in the, and I apologize, I don't know if it's in the special permitting process or in the site plan approval process. But that certainly,
And of both.
Oh, yeah, just the whole process together. We talked about that a lot. We did some things, and you know what, I don't know if I highlighted in here, but we talked about, where the facility was specifically, if there was, I wish I could remember where it was. It didn't apply to this particular one, so I think I may not have highlighted it. But one of the things that we put into the bylaw was if they were on a main thoroughfare, that the entrance had to be on that location and not behind or near a residential area. So we consider traffic in that. So that's something that we specifically put within the bylaw. I can search for it and tell you exactly where it is after or throughout the discussion here. But one of the things, and I think that you'll find this, it's very different when we started the conversations, because the other two other retail establishments had recently opened within Massachusetts, right? Traffic was a huge issue. And Chief Clark was kind enough to reach out to the chief of police in one of those locations, and they talked about it. And and really, like, location has become kind of traffic has become non-existent, right? You might see the influx initially, but it really operates as many other retail establishments operate. It doesn't have, because there are more retail establishments throughout the state, right? It doesn't have like the big bang, and everybody's not running to this one retail establishment to make a purchase. So it is definitely, with that location at 140, it's a high traffic location. I think the traffic study is going to be great to have. And certainly I think one of the residents mentioned, sometimes it's difficult to get out on that street. Like, I know, just trying to cross from Alberta's to the other side, you never, it's never an easy issue. And to be honest, when we looked at Solar Retail Norton and the other applicant that was across the street, where I can't remember anything but the parkour in that location, one of the things that came up in that discussion was safety, right? People walking, as well as people trying to leave, because it was just a little bit closer to the highway and into the 4 lanes. Or it might be 6 lanes there now. One of the things I highlighted too, and it's the specifics are actually in the host community agreement, are around the security measures. So Chief Clark, we went through and he gave us a list of specific security measures. Upon discussion with Town Council, it was noted to be best put in the host community agreement versus the bylaw. So I would just, as a gentle reminder, just ask the board to look at that. It is on the last page of the host community agreement. They were pretty specific in the requirements. Chief Clark's been involved, and as Paul said, he'll continue to be involved. But they did a really good job of identifying, what we wanted to see, access to video and other types of things as well, to make sure, we can respond as appropriate. So, and then noting too as well, I imagine that you have this too, the different security policies, emergency procedures, the waste disposal procedures. I think this is more around cultivation and manufacturing than a retailer. And it mentions here the vehicle traffic and odor control plans as well. And then some of the other written plans that we've listed here too. Most of this, I think the only thing maybe that we didn't look at from the initial review was, I don't remember marketing and advertising being in there, but we touched on many of these items too. And I think that is it. There's a note here that I highlighted just because it's, the applicant provides us copies to multiple departments, and then, we review the application, submit written recommendations, but there is this stipulation here that if we don't provide written recommendations within 35 days, that it's deemed to have a lack of opposition. So just a note on the timing there. Anything that I might be missing? I don't know, from the special permit conditions, it just lists out, that imposing conditions reasonably appropriate to these items that I think you guys consider pretty much in your standard daily work, and then a findings section as well. And I don't, not being familiar with your specific process in other areas, I don't know if these are comparable to that, or if it's specific to marijuana establishments. But when I look at things, about adverse visual or economic impacts on abutters or other parties, I think that this is standard in your review overall.
Yeah, it lines up fairly well with our standard conditions, but Paul, I'm sure that it's already on your mental list to include these in our findings of fact in any decision that we make. So.
Right. Chair, you'll want to, as we go through the decisions with this, right, some of these will be findings, and then we have to decide, which conditions do we feel need to be in there. But we could certainly pull out a lot of these and put them in as conditions, related to things like if you're to sell the property, sell the use, a modification would be required that, we'll
all things that we will evaluate as we review this application.
So,
Yeah. This and other applications. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's language too in the host community agreement around the same, like transfer and things like that. So there are, I think there are good controls on both sides.
Yes.
And then finally, just the basic, the nuisances, severability, conflicts. Oh, and there's my name at the bottom. But I think these are pretty standard within the bylaws. So with that, any specific questions or anything I can help clarify now or potentially come back with an answer?
I do not have anything. I won't speak for everybody on the board, so I'll see if any of the members of the board have questions for you as kind of in your role as member of the select board as well as the Economic Development Commission. So wearing multiple hats at any one.
Right.
Okay. Scott, do you...
No, I was just going to say no questions on my side. We do hear you.
Yeah.
It's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And again, if we have any questions, please, we don't need to be shy and send them to Paul for circulation to other people within the select board or the EDC or other members of the town. So,
Tim, I think it'll be important, as we work through this, just to make sure that the host agreement and the bylaw and our decisions all speak the same language. We don't want one saying something that's not in the other, or vice versa, or having conflicting information. So I think it's just going to be on us to just make sure that all those things, kind of speak to the same tone, to the same direction, those type of elements. I think that's probably going to be something that we just have to keep an eye on, just because there's so many different documents that are going to regulate this one use, which is not something that we're normally doing on the planning board. It's kind of our decisions, and that's that. We don't have this kind of like added layer of complexity. So I think that's just something that we can keep an eye on.
okay.
Yeah, and Julie, if I can add to that too, there were a couple things that were in the host community agreement early on that we excluded so that we didn't have kind of duplication in both places. And you guys certainly tell us as you're going through this if there are pain points specifically in the HDA, because we have the ability to make modifications to that so that any future applicant coming through, whether it's a retail establishment or cultivator, we can do that to make the process simpler, especially if we've overlooked something like we did previously with the bylaw.
Thank you, Renee.
Sure.
Mr. Keys, it's not a public hearing now, but if you have a specific question, I hopefully can answer it if you...
Just a brief comment, and I apologize if I'm out of order here, but having seen some of the amendments to the bylaws, this just gets better and better, right? It's just a lot of great work by a lot of terrific people, particularly providing protections if ownership changes from a retail establishment to a manufacturer, the whole entire different set of circumstances relative to each particular location where an applicant might want to seek to do business. I just think everybody's done a terrific job. Sorry to be a cheerleader, I'll get my pom-poms out, but just applaud everybody for the great work that they're doing on this. Thank you.
We appreciate it very much because it's usually complaints that we hear, so thank you.
Yeah, that's not how I roll, but sorry. Just terrific work, everybody. Thank you.
So you have to come with a complaint next time. That's a mandate. I'm just kidding. No. Okay. Well, thank you, Renee, for your time.
No, thank you guys. I appreciate it. And I'll get to you or to Paul the link to the CCC regulations and then the MGL chapters that are referenced in the bylaw.
Yeah, and I know I've reviewed them at various lengths of depth at various times. But it's always good to make sure that we're looking at the actual updated versions, since I know they've added a bunch of stuff even in the last year around delivery licenses and all sorts of new stuff that we haven't really had to address, and it may not be relevant to this application, but it's relevant to the whole process. And
yeah.
okay.
Awesome. Well, great. Thank you again. I appreciate your time. And if there are any questions, I'm always around.
Okay. Thank you. With that, we are at the end of our agenda this evening. I'm not sure if anybody has anything further to add. Paul, I see your hand up there, so I will hold off from accepting any motions from members of the board.
Nicole has an announcement to make.
Oh.
This is the one time you get my camera. Thanks, Paul. I just wanted to say that I'm very grateful for being able to be a part of this board with you guys for this long. But I will be moving on. This will be my last meeting with you guys. So I guess that's the news.
Thank you, Nicole.
Ooh.
Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah, it's been fun to learn about this.
Okay. Well, thank you, Nicole. Sorry we can't see you again in our meetings.
You know where to find us, though.
Yeah, thank you for everything, Nicole.
My honor.
Nicole, thank you for everything that you do for the planning board, and we will continue to keep in touch on Facebook, right?
Sounds good, Peter.
Right? And pretty soon, in-person meetings coming soon, right, everyone?
We can all hope so.
Right?
Okay. Well, with that sad announcement out of the way, I don't think we have anything else left on our agenda this evening.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, Julie, for the motion and Steve for the second. Is there any further discussion? Just kidding, I'm not really going to wait. I will go to members for a vote on the motion to adjourn, starting with Wayne.
Yes.
Alan.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Julie.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Kevin.
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Thank you very much for your time, everybody. We will see you again in 2 weeks on the 11th.
Have a good night, everyone.